Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. We are just going to give it 1 more minute to make sure everyone's arrived and then we'll start. Thanks very much. Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. The webinar will start now with Mark McGinn and Jermaine Broadbent.
Hello. Thanks for joining us. I'm assuming that everyone can hear okay. If you can't, let us know somehow. I think through the chat or the Q&A. I'm not quite sure which is switched on, but Lorraine has got control of all of that. So just to quickly introduce ourselves, today we've got Mark McGinn, who's the owner, founder of MarXtar. Mark has a long history in ITSM and asset management, endpoint management. He can talk about himself later in the webinar, I'm sure. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. So I've been working within the software industry since 2012, came into it from a fintech higher education area, and then moved into service management in 2022, joined MarXtar in 2023, and here I am. So I'm working here as an account executive, looking after all of our current customers and our new customers too. So a little bit about MarXtar in general. So we're a consultancy-led company. Here is the consultant leading right here next to me. And yeah, 3/4 of the company are consultants, and then there's a handful of us who are working in the sales, account management, all of the kind of auxiliary services to the consultancy, but very much we're a tech-led company. We are ITSM experts along with asset management, CMDB, endpoint management. Mark can expand on any little areas that I have missed, and I'll be making mental notes if I know him well. And here today we are here to talk about AdminQ and about our services really, and managed services specifically. It's going to be a very kind of casual webinar, if you like. It's half an hour. We don't have loads of slides. We just have me and Mark chit-chatting. So a bit like a fireside chat, but without the fire, sadly. So it's daytime. So are we ready to kick off, Mark? Are you happy to answer my questions?
Absolutely.
Good. So as long as they're about sort of, you know, software and services and things like that. Anyway, right. So let's kick off. So just as a quick intro, Mark, you know, what exactly is AdminQ?
Okay, I mean, that, I suppose in itself, that's a big question to start with. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, AdminQ is what I class as the sort of the missing piece to our service offerings. You know, we've been doing this for quite a while. We just haven't had it under the term of AdminQ. So it's a service where we deliver the actual administration of service management, also beyond into the endpoint management side as well. And by that, I mean the general administration activities or the configuration and the customization of the systems that you'd normally expect a trained administrator to be doing for you. So not normally what you'd expect a consulting engagement to do. It's the day-to-day activities within there. So in short, what we're doing is we're talking about an administrative queue of activities that would normally be an internal administrator. And the fact that we've got a queue, you'll never guess where the name AdminQ came from at all. But what we're looking at is what we term as business as usual administration activities or business as usual configuration activities. And those activities are built on or delivered based on the order and the priority in which they come in, as any standard administrator would do, you know, what comes into the list of the things that they're going to be working on. But the difference with this compared to standard consultancy is we're not going to have to pre-schedule time in order to deliver that. It's an activity is going to happen in real time and is available as though you've got an internal administrator within there. So in a nutshell, that's what AdminQ is doing. The administration of that system.
So I know that, you know, we weren't doing this, for example, when I joined the company in 2023, and it's sort of come about, if you like, within 2024. What's been that kind of journey, you know, from your perspective in that managed service? Where has this need come from?
Okay, I mean, like I say, it's not something we haven't been doing for people before. It's just it hadn't been an official model that we'd named and really structured. So a lot of the ways in which our service has developed over the years has been to plug the gaps or based off our experiences to identify where solutions, implementations, projects fail and deliver a service that fills that gap. You know, call off consulting being one standard is very good, and we've done it from an hours-based perspective, so it's very flexible, but it's a reactive model. You know, we did life coach to be a proactive thing in order to try to deal with stakeholders, do proactive work, and engage on a regular basis to evolve systems beyond the go live. We've had managed service, which took on one of the other fundamental areas where systems often failed is keeping the lights on within there. Quite often there's a lot of, want of a better term, drudge work in order to check the system is operational so that on the day that you need it, it's there. Because quite often, if you go to use something you don't normally use and it doesn't work, the opinion, the reputation of that system just dies. And really, it's not a technical issue. It's simply administration. So that's sort of what people have seen as our managed service up until recently. But the AdminQ piece is something that we've been unofficially delivering using either a life coach or an hours model. AdminQ more formalizes that into the right sort of delivery model to deliver that administration piece in a cost-effective way.
Okay, and so it's interesting that you mentioned that the kind of the cost-effective way. I know it's a little bit early to kind of launch into pricing, but I'm just curious how you sort of view that to be more cost-effective, and how does the pricing work in that way?
Okay, I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into a huge amount of detail because we want to talk about the service rather than try to put a price on it. But ultimately, what we looked at is, I suppose, why shouldn't we have been using the models that we've already been using? And the key one of those is they were never built to do this type of activity. Well, fundamentally, it was consultant level costs, hours that people were using to do sometimes very small pieces of work. You know, so the granularity of the consumption of the hours wasn't enough. But also the complexity didn't really justify a consultant that had 15, 20 years of experience either. So it didn't quite feel right to be, let's be honest, it's nice to always get that money, but it's not necessarily nice if it's not the right sort of costing model. So what we've built within there is a tiered model, something that is designed to specifically address the needs of administration. So we've got the two levels that I talked about. Business as usual administration is just the day-to-day activities, you know, setting up a user, modifying a role, or you know, changing a report or scheduling or creating a template, the sort of things that somebody would just be doing as part of their job that might take 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But we didn't want that to be a consumable item. So essentially that is an unlimited type activity. So it's built in. We will do what needs to be done. But then that's supplemented with what we term as the business as usual configuration. And that's a sort of the low to mid level complexity of a configuration activity, building a dashboard, building a report, or building a service request item. Things that, again, an internal administrator with the right level of skill and knowledge would be able to do, but might be a little bit too much really for a full-blown consultant within there. And that we've looked at as it is a consumable piece, but it has a granularity down to a 15-minute rather than 1 hour. And because it's a team that's dedicated to delivering it, you're not having to wait 3 days or whatever it is within there. It goes into that queue and it's funneled into either the administration or the configuration. And that's how it's structured. So it's built to deliver on administration rather than trying to shoot on a consulting model in.
That's very interesting about the timing that you mentioned and the 15-minute, and sort of being there all the time sort of thing. So tell me a little bit more about the AdminQ team and how you've sort of envisaged it and built it.
Okay, so it's not a server that's being delivered by our traditional consulting team. That team is still out delivering on brand new implementation projects or working on our life coach models, provided the best practice advice and so on, continual service improvement. They're being booked out regularly, and therefore the lead time for their involvement, depending on where we are within the month, the quarter, the year, varies between a few days to sometimes a few weeks. So consistency wouldn't be there from a consultancy perspective. So what this is a dedicated team focused around the managed services. But that team, while not the full consulting team, is still part of that consulting organization, still reports into Julian Wigman, who's our Director of Professional Services. So there's no siloed mentality within there. It's the same team. You're still supported with the knowledge and the experience of the consulting. And the team itself, while I suppose you could say more junior than the consulting team, are still fully certified from a technical perspective with each of the solutions that we're supporting within there. So we're not talking about cheap, inexperienced resources that we found in whatever cheap country we're working in these days. It's all UK-based resource, but fully certified on the technologies they do and fully supported by the wider consulting team because they are part of that team, but they're ready to deliver this service.
Okay, and obviously at MarXtar we support 3 vendors, 3 ITSM systems, Ivanti, Fresh Service and Halo ITSM. I assume AdminQ covers all of those?
Yeah, it's vendor agnostic because ultimately the administration requirements are there no matter what technology or what the vendor tells you about how simple those systems are. There's still the day-to-day activities. And while it differs as to exactly the types of things you need to do on a day-to-day basis between the systems, the experience to be able to do that effectively, the best practice knowledge and experience coupled with the technical knowledge, those things come together. So it's still to make a good administrator within there. So it's not tied to any one particular vendor.
Okay, so let's look at we've talked about AdminQ, the people who are doing it, our team, and the technology. Let's look at the customers a little bit. Are there any particular types of organizations or particular types of roles within organizations or situations that you feel that this particularly serves well?
Okay, I mean, I suppose it's not unique to any particular industry because just about every industry needs service management and therefore also needs administrators. So it's not an industry specific thing, although there are uniquenesses across each of them. But I suppose we're really looking at the types of organizations that we need them. There's organizations that always think that managed service is the way. Managing things internally isn't the objective. They'll want that that's not mission critical. That's something that other people will do for them. But that I would say that's the minority of organizations. So we're looking at people that are struggling with challenges such as headcount limitations. They know that they need an administrator or a team of administrators looking after a system, but they've got headcount restrictions, so they can't hire to do that. Or they're struggling to train and maintain that skill set because it does take time and effort to, first of all, find somebody that has the capability, train them in that capability, and then keep them. Because if they're good, quite often they get promoted into another role, even within the same organization, and then you've got to start again. So quite often it's people that have been struggling to really do this because it's just one of a million priorities within the organization, but they know that this is still key, or they've had someone really good that is, like I say, being promoted out. The reward for success is more work and a different role, and then you've got to start again. Or maybe they've come to a point where they're retiring, and you're losing an extremely experienced administrator, and trying to replace is hard. And that's really the sort of thing. That's the sort of situations that tend to be suitable for AdminQ. Where you've not been able to look after it, or you have, and you're losing that capability. Sometimes it's budgetary, other times it's simply a personnel challenge.
Okay, yeah, and I guess none of us can get away from the news at the moment and various issues around the world, along with within our own economy. So it sort of has its place there as well. I'm curious to know, how does this differ from outsourcing, from your perspective at least?
Well, outsourcing traditionally people see as like taking over the entire responsibility for a department. It's people look at it as, well, I'm going to take my entire first level and give it to someone else, or my second level, out to third level, take the entire IT department. So while we talk about this as a managed service, I wouldn't necessarily call it outsourcing. At most I call it out-tasking. We're taking a particular activity. We know that that's a fundamental activity that as an organization, so within IT or whatever department is running this, it needs the focus, but we've just not been able to give it that focus. So we take that particular important task, and that's the piece that we outsource. We're not taking away people's jobs. We're not taking away the wider responsibility. We fit in as part of that team, providing that administration function. So that's why I'd say it's different from outsourcing.
And so I guess, in that way where we're working within a team in one of our customers' companies, but obviously they're not employed by them exactly. What's for you the ideal scenario of the kind of, the engagement, the foundation of getting to know that customer and how it progresses, and how long would the engagement be for? How best do you see it fitting, out of interest? Or have you seen it in examples, for example?
We're generally working on this on an annual basis, because we need enough time to bed in and become part of that standard process within there. But that it's whatever time really makes sense. But annually is the standard model we'd be doing within those agreements. Now, the way in which it works is really becoming part of the team. We're not trying to do is to be a faceless organization within there. We need to have that regular touch point, not just from a technical perspective. This is very similar to how we say from the life coach perspective, is we need to understand what the stakeholders need from the system, because administration isn't just doing what you've been asked to do. It's actually providing the appropriate advice and suggestions at the right time as well. So it's a proper engagement model within there as well that makes this sort of thing successful. Don't just throw it across the fence and expect that thing to magically know what you want, or us to know what you want. Recognize that we're basically a team extension with it, and that team needs communication.
And could actually help assist on KPIs, couldn't it? If it's reporting, for example, I guess that's one of our, we could build things that are kind of quite a little bit more complicated or sophisticated, should we say, than and quicker. We can do it a bit quicker than original.
Yeah, because that is quite often one of the things that it gets an initial focus when people doing an original implementation project, but that gradual evolution of that type of report or the KPIs, whatever you're using, that's the sort of thing that evolves over time, but often isn't necessarily important enough for somebody to talk to us from a full consulting perspective because there's a perceived cost within there. But from an administrative perspective, how do you tweak it? How do you make sure you get the best information from there? But knowing more about the customer environment is key to that.
And I suppose that's sort of like, for me, sort of how I've viewed seeing the consultants working with our customers. There is very much that collaborative aspect and close relationships and, almost friendships, isn't it? Where then people start to grow with what they need. As you say, they start with a few things that need doing, but then it kind of grows into something that develops almost between the engagement with the consultant.
Well, absolutely. I mean, hopefully the people that are used to working with us recognise that very little of the time are you hearing from us from a sales perspective trying to force you to buy the next great latest thing. That a lot of the advice and suggestion we're getting is from the consulting side because they're seeing what it is you're trying to achieve and say, okay, well, we can do this within what you've got, or we have these other models that might be best suited. And really, that's where AdminQ came out of. It's a natural evolution. Project-based stuff was great up to go live, and then a year later we find that everything's failed because all the wonderful project team members went somewhere else, and we were no longer involved. So we grew the life coach idea so that we could have that continual drip feed of knowledge and experience. That platform, not being looked after, the managed service there. So this is the natural evolution of us identifying reasons why organizations and solutions fail, not necessarily because people don't know what they're doing or the technology is not capable. It's just life gets in the way. So how can we best support that with the right sort of service and engagement?
Okay. Well, we know that if anybody is interested in this type of service, they can contact me, and we can sort of take this forward and discuss it. But what's the type of thing that you would advise our customers or future customers to think about if they're considering AdminQ? When they sit down at their computer, what notes should they start making? Like, what are the keys to success really for you, and how they can prepare before they come and speak to us, if you like, or even work out in their own heads whether they need to?
Well, I suppose one of the things is if you look at your organization today, do you truly have an owner for the system? I don't mean a sort of decision-making owner, somebody that heads the department, but who truly owns that system? Where does the buck stop, as the saying goes? Because if you don't have one of those, then you don't have an owner. You have a lot of people that know something or might do something, but you've not got a particular point where that focus is. And quite often that's one of the challenges that we see within organizations is, you've got 4 separate people maybe that all might do something within the system, but nobody that's really focused on moving it forwards. And quite often that's where things start to fail because it's always somebody else's responsibility. It's not that person's priority. And you end up with probably what you got at go live. It just doesn't evolve. So that's one of the areas I'd say is look at is who owns it? Because actually some of the best consultants in our team were the people that worked in an organization and they basically took that ownership by the neck and actually made that system work in an organization that didn't recognize that. And they've ultimately gone into consulting to an extent of frustration because they've not been able to get the backing within there. Now, that's one of the paths that some people have taken, but ultimately a system at go live is not finished. That's where it begins. And unless you're one of the organizations lucky enough to have a team of like 20 ServiceNow people within there, quite often people are expecting a part-time role to do this. But if it's not clearly defined as a responsibility, then you're likely to see that quality go downhill and maybe end up back on the merry-go-round of, well, it must be the technology that's a problem. Let's replace it with something else.
Okay. I've got 2 more questions, and then I don't know if there are any questions from the viewers, but I'm just curious, sort of, I was thinking of a polite way to say it. You've been in this business for a long time, Mark, and I was just wondering, is there changes to how software is created in ITSM, or how it's used, or the way the vendors do that, and engagements have changed? Like what progression have you seen, or what changes have you seen over the years to get to this point that you think, God, that was so old fashioned the way we did it then, and now it's like this? I'm just curious what your thoughts were on that.
Well, depending on your perspective from an age and an experience, however, you might see this as me just getting old and grumpy. But I think it's a byproduct of really how technology has evolved. I come from the era where in order to make something work, you had to work out how to tell the computer or the system to do what you wanted it to do exactly. You really needed to know the inner workings of something to make it work. But as the years have gone on, people are more used to, well, IT being a consumable thing. You pick up a phone and you don't expect to have to program it. You expect to just press something and it works. It's the user friendliness, the simplicity is more and more being expected. And rightly or wrongly, vendors have been working very hard on trying to make their systems look easier to use, faster time to value, implement. There's less work you need to do within there. But ultimately what we tend to see is there's a level that takes you to, whether out of the box or the wizard driven approach, it gets you there. But when you want to make it do something different to what the vendor built, that's where what we tend to start to hit a little bit of the, I suppose, the conditioning for people is they're expecting that system to do things, and the vendors are making those promises that, yes, this will almost do it all for yourself, whether it's them making promises that AI will replace you all and do everything, or it's so simple you don't need an administrator. But fundamentally, that's not true. Whether it's simple from a technology perspective, we're still talking, especially here, IT service management or enterprise service management. No company is the same as another, really.
Yeah.
They all have the uniqueness. So how do you make something generic do something unique? And that takes not just technical knowledge of that particular product, but best practice knowledge. And that's one of the big things is you bring somebody in and you train them in the tech. You can't train their experience because the only experience they've got is you. Whereas we're building experience in every industry, in every organizations that we work with. And it's an age thing, it's an experience thing, but I suppose that's what I've seen is the drive towards simplicity has sometimes ended with a loss of configurability, or people getting to the point of, it didn't do what I want straight away, therefore it's a problem with the product. And really it tends to be, for the most part, not a technology problem. It's a knowledge and sometimes a drive problem.
Okay. Great. So if one of our customers or new customers is interested in talking about AdminQ, best thing to do, Mark, speak to me and we'll set up a meeting with you. What do you advise? What do you think the best thing to do is?
Well, obviously your account manager, whether that be yourself, Jermaine, me, Rob, whoever it might be, is always a good point of call. But like I said, if you're already working with us, talk to the person that you trust about what this could potentially offer to you. Get some semi-impartial advice from the consulting team as well, because they know what they're talking about. This has grown out of them, but really, with that sort of idea, if it looks like it's of interest to you, what we'd want to do is talk to you, not throw a proposal at you. We can give you the general information of what the structure looks like. We want to talk and understand what your challenges are to properly map it to within there. So discussion, do the tiers that we've got, we've got 3 standard tiers, I think I mentioned, and they're either fixed cost model, so the costs will never go up, or we can have limited flexibility on there so that we can handle peaks of requirements without work having to stop because you need to buy some more time. So we have a range of flexibility within that structure to deal with the different types of organization. But we also have a 4th tier, which is what you need that we haven't written down already. And we can only really map that based off conversation. But it does blend, as we've got within that little graphic up there, it blends into our overall service portfolio. It's not a standalone piece. It fits really well into the continual service improvement of Life Coach or the technical support pieces, if you're on premise, regular updates, or the underlying platform service. So where does it fit in the overall picture? Just by itself or as a blended model with something else? And that needs us talking to you.
Good. Okay, great. Lorraine, if you're still there in the ether, just curious to know if we can see any Q&As. I'll just try and access that myself. We've asked the question already about outsourcing. I think we've distinguished between Life Coach and AdminQ. And I know we have a document that we can send out to interested parties. But really, I guess I think the best thing to do is to sort of talk it over. If somebody's interested in this services and they're not even sure if they want it or they don't want it, the best thing is to kind of talk with us, isn't it? And to kind of talk it through, and you can ask pertinent questions, Mark. So I think we're okay with that. Great. All right. Are there any other aspects that you would like to talk about AdminQ, Mark, that you feel haven't been covered today?
Not with the time that we've got available. I think there's a lot of ways in which this can benefit or blend with what people need within there. But I mean, just so people, I think we've got this recorded, so we'll distribute this to the people that attended, also the people that registered but weren't able to attend as well. But obviously, if you've got any questions, you know where we are.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone, and thanks for answering the questions, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.